The Walnut Tree. The fable of the walnut tree is one of Aesop's and numbered 250 in the Perry Index. It later served as foundation for a different fable based on a proverb about 3 things that are the better for beating, a misogynistic saying widespread in Europe that has many variants worldwide. There are 2 related Greek versions of the fable. Illustrating the ingratitude of those who requite good deeds with cruelty, it concerns a walnut tree standing by the roadside whose nuts the passers-by used to knock off by throwing sticks and stones. It then complained, "People gladly enjoy my fruits, but they have a terrible way of showing their gratitude." Its complaint is related to a debate on gratitude that occurs in a parallel Indian story from the Panchatantra. There a mango tree is asked whether it is lawful to return evil for good and replies that its experience of man is violent treatment despite providing him with fruit and shade. On the other hand, the 18th century German rationalist, Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, questioned whether there are real grounds for gratitude in his fable of the oak tree and the swine. The pig feeding at the foot of an oak is reproached for its motives of pure greed by the tree and replies that it would only feel grateful if it could be sure that the oak had scattered the acorns there out of love for it. The Greek fable was later the subject of an epigram by Antipater of Thessalonica. This in turn gave rise to Latin versions, in one of which the tree is represented as being pelted with rods. There was also a much longer poem, at one time ascribed to Ovid but now thought to be an imitation, in which the nut tree complains at length of the violent way in which it is despoiled. In this more leisurely work of 182 lines, as well as Aesop's fable of the nut tree being the subject, there is a glance at another concerning the travelers and the plane tree. While the fruit tree is treated with no respect, barren plane trees have more honor for the shade they provide. In Renaissance times the fable was taken up by the compilers of emblem books, starting with the originator of this genre, Andrea Alciato. Eventually numbered 193 in the many editions of his emblemata, it bore the device Infertilitatem sibi ipsa damnasam, deriving from the last line of the original epigram by Antipater. Many of the illustrations accompanying this feature boys stoning the tree and gathering its fruit from the ground. In others, however, youths are shown with substantial sticks in their hands, as in the illustration here, and so suggest the folk belief that beating it made the tree more fruitful. A few decades before Alciato first published his emblem, Aesop's fable had served as basis for an independent version by Laurentius Abstemius in his Hecatomythium, published in the 1490s. Numbered 65, Danus, Asino et Muliera describes how a woman asked the abused tree why it was so foolish as to give more and better nuts when struck by more and stronger blows. The tree replied, "Have you forgotten about the proverb that goes, nut tree, donkey, and woman are bound by a similar law, these 3 things do nothing right if you stop beating them." The moral that Abstemius draws from it is that people talk too much for their own good. The Italian proverb based on this lore was perpetuated in Britain for the next 2 centuries. George Petty's translation of the Civil Conversations of Stefano Guazzo, a book first published in Italy in 1574, records that he had once come across the proverb "A woman, an ass, and a walnut tree, bring more fruit, the more beaten they be." What is now the better-known English version appears shortly after in the works of John Taylor. Roger Lestrange includes Abstemius' story in his Fables of Aesop and other eminent mythologists a century later. His shortened version runs, "A good woman happened to pass by, as a company of young fellows were cudgelling a walnut tree, and asked them what they did that for. This is only by the way of discipline, says one of the lads, for 'tis natural for asses, women, and walnut trees to mend upon beating." Lestrange's idiomatic comment, "Spur jade a question, and he'll kick ye in answer," indicates his opinion of the sentiment. People's conversation will betray their true quality. Edmund Airwaker, on the other hand, gives the story another twist in his versified telling of the fables, Truth in Fiction. The talkative woman questions the tree in the course of a solitary walk and it replies in this way in order to silence her. Whatever may have been people's opinion of how well a woman, ass, or dog respond to punishment, the belief that this was beneficial in the case of walnut trees persisted. One encyclopedia of superstitions reports that in country districts it was a common persuasion that whipping a walnut tree tended to increase the produce and improve the quality of the fruit, and that this took place in early spring. Another explanation is that the old custom of beating a walnut tree was carried out firstly to fetch down the fruit and secondly to break the long shoots and so encourage the production of short fruiting spurs.